Okay. I see noon on my clock, and I know we have a lot to cover today, so I'm going to get this show on the road. So good afternoon, and welcome to the first Oklahoma Recycling Association Lunch and Learn. Today we'll be focusing on glass recycling, and we do want you to be aware that we are recording this event. I'm Sarah Ivy, and I'm the Education Committee Chair for OKRA. Lunch and Learns are something that OKRA has been talking about doing over the last year, and we plan to do more of in 2021. While most of us prefer in-person events, it's days just like today that we are thankful for the ability to hold things virtually. It allows more people to participate throughout the state, and we don't have to worry about the weather, so that's wonderful. So for those of you who may not know much about the Oklahoma Recycling Association, which we lovingly refer to as OKRA, we are a nonprofit organization that was established to improve the business of recycling by providing education and referral services about integrated solid waste management, including reduce, reuse, recycling, and compost. And we try to serve as the central communication point for exchange between businesses, industries, government, public and private organizations, schools, and citizens about recycling issues. So we encourage you to check out the OKRA website, which is recycleok.org. And we also encourage you to become a membership. We have a variety of memberships from students and seniors and individuals to government, nonprofit, and businesses. We also want to give a special shout out to the Department of Oklahoma Environmental Quality, who helps make OKRA programs like this possible. So thank you to DEQ. And we will treat the first part of this meeting as a webinar. So for questions for our speaker, we'll be utilizing the chat functions. So if you're participating on Zoom or Facebook Live, just put your questions in the chat and we'll make sure to get those to Ashley. And then for the second part, we want to open it up to live video and audio, as well as chat if you don't have those capabilities. And we're hoping to have a great discussion after we hear from Ashley so that we can maybe see how this applies to our state. So again, we're really glad that you're here today. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Ashley DiGregorio. Ashley's the Recycling Markets Program Manager for the Pennsylvania Resources Council. She has been the champion of their traveling glass bin recycling program, and she's here to tell us all about it. So without further ado, here is Ashley.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited and honored and privileged to be at your first Lunch and Learn as a group. I'm really excited to tell you about our program, and I'm going to pull up my slides. And every time I do this, I find that there's a slight difference. So can you confirm that, just like with a head nod, that you see the slides and not my notes? Okay, thanks. I've had some issues with that. So again, thank you so much. As Sarah said, I'm Ashley. I have been with the Pennsylvania Resources Council, or PRC, for going to be 2 years in April. In 2019, we had just held our first glass recycling event that March. So I came on mainly with the directive of managing and overseeing this initiative about 3 weeks after the first collection. So I'm excited to tell you about how it's taken shape. A little bit just for context of our organization, when I started and when this program started, we were celebrating our 80th anniversary. So PRC is one of the oldest environmental nonprofits of the Commonwealth of of Pennsylvania. We have an office in Philly and an office in Pittsburgh, which is where I'm located and where our glass initiatives have been to date, although we do think that there's opportunity to expand to other regions of the state. For that long of a history, of course, we've pursued a variety of environmental initiatives, but in the last 30 years or so, recycling and other waste reduction strategies have been our focus. And I'm really excited to hear a little bit more about OKRA, because I think the way that we as a standalone nonprofit have, OKRA is almost like the partnership infrastructure that we we wanted to have, and that this program has allowed us to sort of work towards. But overall, in addition to our education and outreach programs and our on-the-ground collection events, which I'll mention how that's taken shape, we often kind of find ourselves recently playing a role similar to, can't remember how you just worded it, Sarah, but helping to sort of clarify some of the links in our region among different sectors and different commodities markets to help kind of get towards circularity in our economies when it's possible. So the story of PRC's glass program really requires a little bit of context about what happened here in our region. In the greater Pittsburgh area, as you can see, we had some shocking news at the beginning of 2019 saying, goodbye glass, recycling changes are taking effect. And this was referencing the South Hills, which is a community, not a community, a region of our county that covers 22 municipalities, suburbs immediately outside of the city of Pittsburgh, and it's a population area in excess of 300,000. The Pittsburgh metropolitan area is, we are located in Allegheny County. I believe we have the second highest number of individual municipalities in a county in the country. So we have a lot of municipally focused services and decision making, which really put our communities in this region in a bit of a shocked position when these changes occurred. And essentially our material recovery facilities and our really major haulers just announced that in new contract bids, there's not going to be glass collected in curbside single stream recycling. And the encouragement was to ask residents to move glass into landfill bound trash. The context that I think might be a little bit different, but about our region, well, about Pennsylvania and especially southwestern Pennsylvania. Not only is southwestern Pennsylvania really fragmented in the way that we kind of do our service delivery in all things, but additionally, Pennsylvania's main recycling and solid waste legislation, which is called Act 101, or which was Act 101, called the Municipal Waste Planning Act. It was landmark legislation 32 years ago, but it's created some out of date and perverse incentives that are having a really big impact, especially on glass. And it really moved Pennsylvania, especially our more urban, suburban areas, away from source separated drop off infrastructure. So we're talking about a focus on mostly curbside, single stream recycling collection, and there's very little public infrastructure ownership. So when PRC came onto the scene, and because, as you can see, that headline shows this was a pretty reactive moment, we were sort of stressing that everyone really should have access to multiple collection models if possible, and we really believed that source-separated drop-off infrastructure we believed and still believe that it needs to return to southwestern Pennsylvania as at least one option for all of our materials, but especially glass. We went in an event-based collection model that I'll explain why that happened. But our vision is that, as I said, to provide with partners to help build towards a regional network. So of course, we had to have some not only relationships but resources to make our program possible. So our managing director at the time developed a relationship with Owens, Illinois, the largest manufacturer of container glass in North America, I believe. And they have been a financial partner and sponsor from the beginning, and CAP Glass, which stands for Carry All Products, is our regional glass processor. So, Strategic Materials and RDOG have a lot of the market in the Midwest and Southwest, but CAP is Pennsylvania's location for processing, cleaning, and sorting glass. And they are not only a partner just broadly, but they invested in a lot of the equipment, and we'll talk about that. And so we approached them to say early on in 2019 to say, what are the options and how do we support our communities with these options? In addition, it came time to pull in local and regional haulers, so roll-off services and other, trucking fleets, because ourselves as a small environmental nonprofit, that's not an operation that we conduct ourselves. And it's also not something that our processor, that they wanted to be part of their business model, but it has been an important partnership. And then, of course, our municipalities and our surrounding counties. So we essentially started and continued the initiative with our really community engagement sort of approach of meeting with our municipalities and trying to just build those partnerships from the ground up, and especially trying to facilitate as much integrated decision making as possible. So cost shares, collaborations between multiple municipalities at the same time, etc. Naturally, we had to, and still sometimes do have to spend some time debunking or clarifying some of the misconceptions that are being provided as the reasoning behind these changes. And as our communities have been hearing, there's no market for glass, so it's not going into it can't go into your single stream anymore. We wanted to really clarify what our opportunities were and why that might be really missing a big part of the picture. Similar to Oklahoma, we know that our region has a wealth of, if we were in Montana, we might be in a different situation, but we have a wealth of different options in the industry. And as you can see when we zoom in, we don't just have processors nearby or even just fiberglass plants, we have container manufacturers. So there's just such a rich opportunity for us to, if we can facilitate collection, have real circularity with this material. So in terms of the region and how, what the geographics are, the regional processor is only 50 miles away from the Pittsburgh, the center of the city of Pittsburgh, which is, nothing. But also, I do want to point out that they invested in some of the local hauling and scrap yard type, partners have also invested in storage points, which have been a really important resource for us, as well as for the communities in maintaining efficiency and especially the cost efficiency. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. This map just shows an outline of the county. We have gone outside of the county, but this kind of shows how it's been, because it's such a individually municipality to municipality managed contracts in our region. Even where there is some consolidation or integration, we're still seeing that the contract changes are happening. It's kind of like chicken pox around our region. And so this is how we kind of started in the west and south of the county in 2019 and expanded throughout 2020 to try to meet the need where it was popping up. So in 2019, we partnered with 27 municipalities and collected 200 tons of glass from about 10,000 households. In 2020, we were able to expand to over 35, give or take, municipal partners and 300 tons. So as you can kind of see, we're trying to scale this up each year. So as I mentioned, none of this would be possible without a really multi-sector, public, private, and nonprofit partnerships. We try to offer, again, a lot of similarities in the missions, I think, between us and Okra, but offering some technical assistance and some confidence in, not just showing up with a service, but really trying to help our communities be part of, have a seat at the table and what this looks like. And then I'll talk a little bit about the equipment, the supplies, our messaging and materials, and logistical operations of how this all works. So just to talk about that regional infrastructure that we do rely on, this is the top photo is a photo of our team visiting the main processing facility that is 50 miles away from the city. We were able to see the optical sorting technology, how they sort by color and clean and prepare the cullet, the glass, scrap cullet for resale. That was awesome, but it is also important. This is actually the city of Harrisburg's picture, but these are all basically the same. That the other photo kind of demonstrates the storage bunkers that have been installed in scrap yards or transfer station, recycling center type locations in the Pittsburgh area. This allows us to have a single roll-off container at a collection site in one of our communities delivered there, and then 20 to 25 ton hauls can be picked up by Cap Glass, and that is at their discretion. So while we are managing all of the intercity or intermetro roll-off transpo, they're managing that larger level transpo. And we started with one that they invested in. Some of the local haulers are starting to install two more. So you can see it's just a 3-walled concrete bunker that allows for trucks to get in and out. So as far as our program, we do have 3 iterations that have sort of like built over the years, and I'll talk about how that's worked. So in 2019, at the beginning of this program, we started with what we called our pop-up glass collection events. The reason for this was because, I'll start by clarifying as well that for all of our collections, we contract with our municipalities, or ideally a group of municipalities that are, contiguous and sharing responsibility to provide the service. They pay for covering the majority of the costs of our time and the roll-off or hauling services. And we do try to subsidize some of that cost with our financial sponsorship from the industry. And we're actually kind of experimenting with how we could even use that kind of a model to do some sliding scale to make this more accessible, regardless of the the financial assets of one community versus another. But when we contracted with them in the beginning, because, like I mentioned, we are really asking our communities here to return to an old and kind of retired paradigm. So it's understandable that there would be some hesitation before jumping in feet first and investing in the infrastructure of something that we haven't really tested the success of in 15 to 20 years. So we said, okay, if there are concerns, PRC already operates the region's household hazardous waste and electronic waste collection events, which, it's almost like in a lot of regions that would be done by a solid waste district or a solid waste authority, but we do that as a contracted service provider. And so we said, okay, well, we already have institutional knowledge to do events, and we'll just do some events and see where this takes us. These pop-up events were 1-day Saturday events for 5 hours. People from far and wide could come. And as you can see, there was a nice little, traffic directing setup. The residents could come and they would be greeted by a couple of our staff and a team of volunteers who would not only help, put the material into the container, but would kind of inspect and have a conversation. So it was a real educational engagement. We were seeing a lot of contamination, and I also like to say that I'm an unlicensed mental health provider, because there was a lot of broken hearts that I had to, I always have to be a support system for. I can't believe I can't recycle glass anymore, but they can. So these allowed us to determine that the demand for the collection services is high. There was some uncertainty. It allowed us to educate, like I said, but it also helped us to evaluate and mitigate any perceived problems of unstaffed permanent sites, such as illegal dumping. We'll talk about that as well. But this photo is from our first event. It was in March of 2019. We thought we were going to get 100 or 150 people with a few jars. It was in excess of 600 people, and we collected 9 tons of glass. So we needed to call for a second roll-off. So as you can see, the demand was made loud and clear early on. In 2020, not only had we realized that the pop-up events were great from a community event perspective, but after a couple of times, there's diminishing marginal returns. It's very hands-on. You got to have staff in the parking lot, and really, people don't really need long-term someone to take their glass or their, cans and put it in an bin. So we really wanted to help our communities, especially those who had already had a history of partnering thus far, move toward a permanent solution and continue to do the pop-ups in areas where this was a new issue for a community. Well, of course, at the beginning of the pandemic, we recognized that the one-day events, they were too interpersonal, and there were some serious public health concerns. And we had already been working towards a permanent model. So our managing director at the time was on vacation, and I think 10 o'clock in the morning, the day he got back to the office on like March 20th, I called him and said, let's just let them rent the permanent model. We've got to provide some option to get this material collected however we can during this uncertain period. So what we did was we branded it the traveling glass bin, and we have basically it's a week-long rental of the container. The collection is advertised Saturday through Thursday, and it's self-serve like a permanent site would be. And it is, we do visit the site, we do remote monitoring, but it's great because it's immediate and it's more semi-permanent than those one-day events. It's not so transient. And this is a typo, I apologize. It's easier to implement very quickly with very few resources. So we could do a collection every single week with only 2 containers and like 1 set of signs. But the cost comparison is probably the same as if you had a bin in place all month, but it's just the volume is really consolidated into 6 days, and so it's more monitoring intensive. And so just kind of recognizing that you're going to pay the cost of hauling in 1 week that you might pay over the course of a month. Because there are times, a lot of times we only use 1 roll-off container, but sometimes we have had to change out during the course of a single week, just depending on the population density in that area. So the equipment that we use, this is where it's really important, where our partners come in. I know I see like we have Ripple Glass on, and there are some other, which I'm really excited to talk to you all. But there are some other models in the country where the capital investment has really been all public or all private. And so for us, it's really important that Cap Glass has invested in this capital equipment of the roll-off containers and allow us to utilize it. We use 25-yard capacity containers that are roofed and have 3 of these sliding doors on either side. So we can collect between 4 to 6 tons, and we do collect mixed, again, glass rather than color separated, because it's going to go to a processor or beneficiation facility to be separated. In 2019, we only had 1 container at our disposal, so we used it for that one-day event, and we were always basically right there with the container. In 2020, CAP was willing to expand, which made the traveling bin possible by expanding to 2 and then eventually 6 containers over the course of the year. So we have a switch out option now. And then in 2021, we're up to, they've invested to like 10 and counting containers. So again, we don't have to deadhead these containers. We don't have to take a full container, leave a site without a container and then bring it back empty. We have a small fleet to switch these out. And the last I got in our marketplace, last I got a quote for these, it was 8,000 to 9,000. I understand that the steel market's pretty volatile after the pandemic, so I hope that's evened out. We have a set of traffic pylons and bases that we actually use as a on-the-go sign infrastructure for our events, and so we design some plastic-core signs, and we adhere all of these different signs to just a couple of traffic pylons, and that's what we provide to these sites. We did invest in some internal cameras with part of our financial sponsorship. I actually have found that we do have a couple of permanent sites that we're operating, but I've actually found that this camera, our subscription is even more valuable for the traveling bin sites because, again, the traveling glass bin is just more monitoring over a shorter period of time. So it allows us to monitor the fill remotely and schedule on-demand hauling and to track the contamination, which is incredibly minimal, so low. And for the communities, again, the municipal managers who want some data and wanted to understand and have peace of mind about those fears of contamination, it's really helpful. As far as what we offer, as I mentioned, we're contracted. And we are kind of the sole source provider that then we deal with the hauler, we deal with the processor, we deal with everyone else. The municipality just works with us. We partner with them to decide on a suitable location and do all of the hauling coordination and reporting. We provide and create education and outreach materials for their use and lend out our signage on the sites and set all that up for them. We do our remote monitoring, of course, and we do a couple of maintenance visits, just for general upkeep. Although I will say after we go to a site once, I really find that the need for us to be at the site kind of decreases pretty substantially. So that's a really nice thing. I think, there's capacity building among our residents and municipalities. So the way that we operate this week-long model is we have our small fleet and we say, okay, I have a schedule going on my spreadsheets and I have my cameras that show where the containers are at any given time. I arrange transportation with our haulers for the dates, and their hauling days are Fridays. So they deliver the container to the collection site for us on a Friday. It is open to the public Saturday through Thursday. And these are not, we're not out there policing, but we are just encouraging. Again, this is self-serve, and this should be, we find that residents really respect the service, right? And the following Friday after that collection period, the container is removed. It will be brought to the consolidation point, weighed and emptied, and as it happens, it might be brought that same day to the next site, which a collection could be starting that very next day. In moving to the traveling glass bin model, we did put a decent amount of time into creating some more remote education and outreach information that was easily, understandable. As this photo on the left is from our final pop-up event of 2019, actually the last pop-up event we ever did. It actually was really insane, so I'll tell you about it later. So thank God it was the last one we did for a while. But as you can see, there's this great group of volunteers and a couple of our staff, kind of bundled up in the cold, ready to explain all of the ins and outs of what's allowed in this bin. And so in the absence of that and really seeking even more efficiency across the region, we created some of these materials and some accompanying blog material to just say what's accepted, what's not. And we share this far and wide with our municipalities because again, even if they're not contracting us for the service, this is based on industry best practices as we understand. So we've found that it's been very helpful, and there's been a lot of remote conversation from people interacting with that kind of resource in our blogs. This is a slide that I usually, I would go into a little bit more detail about if this was a different presentation, but I want to focus on one of the things that we think about a lot in addition to general regional job and, sustainability goals that we point to in terms of the value of glass recycling. One of the issues that we continue to try to discuss with our municipalities is that in light of the changes that have occurred to our curbside contracts, we expect that everyone in our county and the surrounding counties is not going to have access to curbside glass recycling in their single stream container. At some point in the foreseeable future, it will be across the region. So that's our expectation. This means that if their residents are putting their heaviest material now in their landfill-bound trash, our municipalities' contracts haven't gotten cheaper, but now their heaviest material is about to increase their landfill tipping fees. Unfortunately, the Pennsylvania Recycling Grant Fund is in a little bit of a crisis moment right now following the pandemic, but that's a subject of another presentation. But on the whole, we do work with our communities. Many of them apply for one of our grants through our DEP, being the Recycling Performance Grant. It's just an award grant. It's non-restricted funding, so it's really helpful for supporting their programs, but it's based on tonnage. So, if your heaviest material is now being removed from what you're reporting to our DEP that you collect for recycling every year, that's going to decrease their award that they see on an annual basis. So that's something that we're trying to continue to talk about, is how can we help make this a reality everywhere in our region to avoid that. And finally, we just really want to, we've been focusing really on setting up the sites for success as part of our model. We talked about the fear of aesthetic upkeep and cleanliness and safety and illegal dumping. And ironically, this photo is from a pop-up event in 2019. And as you can see, I'm actually in the middle there. And you have another staff person, and then all of these people are volunteers that were there. We had this whole setup, but we still, just because of the high volumes that we got in some of these one-day events, actually had more of a upkeep issue. So in moving from this to the traveling glass bin, we were actually able to see much more orderly and safe site performance. So how do we do this? We just try to help encourage that the locations be highly visible sites, that there be, hopefully that it's a place that has a lot of either foot or vehicular traffic. And of course, we want to help provide some of the upkeep of the site. And the remote monitoring is very important because we want to schedule hauling in a very proactive manner so that there's no overflows. We put signage at the site to say, if this container is full, it will be replaced tomorrow, so please come back tomorrow, that kind of thing. Like I said, we help with that education. We encourage people to really think in our communities about what outlets there are near the location for other materials. But again, we just really don't see a lot of contamination. But those are some of the things that we try to help in building those expectations. So the what's next, this is sort of my what's next for us slide. Going into 2021, and I hope long-term into the future, we do expect to continue offering the traveling glass bin. And we are now also partnering to help set up permanent sites. So my hope, we've just set up, or we're about to finalize the setup of 3 new permanent sites in the northern suburbs of the Pittsburgh area. My hope is that we can have this spectrum, as we currently do, of this week-long model, a permanent model, and even some of the one-day, maybe not that the container is only there one day, but that we can come and have more of a community Earth Day event type of thing, and have these different things available so that there's always something, no matter where our communities are on the spectrum of feasibility and readiness for permanent sites. So basically the summation I would say is that there's the easy stuff we've found, which is creating the education and outreach materials and really being that active partner to build confidence among all of our stakeholders, whether it's residents or community representatives. And identifying hauling partners, everybody has a wealth of roll-off services in different areas usually, and just finding who is willing to do that service and partner and negotiate a reasonable rate. The stuff that was trickier and that has to be a longer term question is who's going to invest in the more higher value capital equipment like the roll-off containers. It doesn't have to be this size to be a successful program, but someone has to put that investment out there, and we couldn't have done that ourselves as a nonprofit. And then how are you going to manage the site operations? It's pretty background logistical now, which is great, and a lot of hands-off, but it does take some monitoring. And then I just always like to recognize that these are our key partners. I'm happy to provide these slides so that any of the information, I always put these resources, even though a lot of folks on the call either represent these organizations or are very familiar with these, but just to say some of the data that we use to back up some of our decisions is in these realms. And so like I said, just to open up for questions now, I'm happy to share any of these or go back to different slides for specific conversations.
Ashley, that was amazing. Thank you so much for all that information and for all the work that PRC and you have been doing to make glass recycling a possibility in the Pittsburgh area. So that's wonderful to hear. I don't have any questions that I'm seeing in the chat. Kima, did you get any questions that came through on Facebook Live at this point?
I don't have any question coming up from Facebook.
Okay, so what I want to do then is just allow anyone on the call to unmute or type in your question or join us however you would like to get the conversation started. I do know we have quite a few folks who are well versed in glass in Oklahoma. So we have Ripple Glass, we've got the Glass Packaging Institute, we've got Owens, Illinois, and Fertile Ground all with us today. So, and I also know we have a lot of folks from communities from all over the state, both big and small. So we really just want to see what Oklahoma's thinking about doing something similar, or I know there's a big desire to get more glass recycling in our state. So I do see one question here, Ashley, which is, why do you think you see such little contamination?
Yeah, and I want to apologize because now I realized I did not see in the chat you folks were saying that you could see my notes, so I apologize for that. But I think the reason that we have attributed our low contamination rates is a couple of, at first I thought, well, like when I was in policy school, everyone would say like there's the counterfactual, you can't know. When we set up only the pop-up events, I thought, well, we're just seeing low contamination because we're there, or we're just seeing low contamination because we've already seen some of these same residents and we've spoken to them directly. But in a couple of the locations where we didn't hold a pop-up event and where some of the communities basically said, hey, we're just going to go ahead and set up a bin. There are a couple of haulers that are not working with us directly, and that's great. But even those places, we're not seeing, no one is really seeing high contamination. And I think that the success that the only thing I can attribute it to is one, they're in very visible sites, and oftentimes, it's like right next to the fire station or some other really high traffic site. But also, I really do think that the residents that, this is very anecdotal. I just keep, having residents say, I'm just so scared that this service is going to be taken away. And I think that, because it's not something that they can take for granted because they don't have that service for other materials in our region, there's been a lot of sort of like public ownership by the general public, I should say, which has been really nice. And the city of Pittsburgh, their 3 sites, I do see that they have a little bit more contamination. I think that those sites, we support them, but we're not involved in the coordination, and those are a little bit, they have a less frequent upkeep around the site. So I think it's been really successful to just make sure, there's no litter around. I think people seeing that the site's respected by some ends up kind of creating a social pressure.
Sarah, it's Scott DeFife. I thought I would add in, and it's great to see Ashley. How are you doing? There's stuff to talk to you about as soon as we can connect. Drop-offs get really good. I mean, and I'm sure Josh can chime in on this too. Drop-offs get pretty good success rate with low contamination, especially if the containers are designed in a way to limit what can, the opening that can go in, and it, either make them go in, one by one or in small groups instead of just being an open top dumpster that you can put things in. In Northern Virginia, the contamination rates are really, really low for the drop-off bins that are used up here. 98% glass, and very little. They're serviced, and they're not manned at all. They're serviced weekly because they're full. And so I think, and they usually put them at community centers or some other county or city facility that may not even be a typical place to drop off recyclables, but is got other action going on. So it's not just this remote parking lot somewhere that's really distant where somebody can sneak up with a pickup late at night and drop off a couch or something. But designing the bin helps.
Awesome. Thanks for chiming in, Scott. And yeah, I think anecdotally myself as well, I used to work a drop-off center in the city of Mustang years ago, and the people who are willing to take that extra step to drive their recyclables somewhere are the ones that are wanting to do it right. So as long as they are educated about what can go in there, then that's the kind of stuff that they want to bring. So we do have a few more questions that have popped up. So, and Ashley, you can take this, or any of the rest of you, but can you speak a bit more about the myths as to why glass recycling stopped? This person thought it was a demand issue.
Oh, myths. I'll let Ashley go first. She can talk
I was just about to say, Scott's going to want to tap in on this one. So, our region, so I basically do a presentation for our municipalities that's a lot like what, Scott, you and some of the other industry trade group leaders do. So it's globally true, but in our region, I'll just speak to what happened was that, we have a couple of main material recovery facilities, and really one especially immediately west of the city center. And the issue, I think that it has been decided by Waste Management and Republic Services that there is not a appetite to invest in the larger costs for thorough cleaning and preparation and sorting of glass that's required. from a single stream load. And that is what we see being this decision-making factor in our region. The way that it used to work is that Cap Glass got their materials from all of the technology to properly clean and prepare that material for cullet. And it's single stream glass. It's more intensive in terms of the process that it needs to go through. But the glass industry, like Cap Glass and our regional manufacturers, the demand is so, and of course, again, Scott is going to tap in, I know, to say that this is a global, this is a national reality. The demand is only higher. The supply is well below and already was below what the demand is for recycled glass. But if the single stream processor does not want to invest in the additional costs of business to prepare it as needed to really recover it, then it creates a different reality that we're seeing now.
I'll tap in.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to let others, talk about it. And each region can have a slightly different, economic, framework or underpinning that will explore it. It is not about demand. Sorry, I just swallowed wrong. It's not about the demand from the container side or the fiberglass side, quite honestly. Both industries want more. It is about, can you get the quality material through the system from a single stream system? It requires sorting at the MRF, and yes, it requires a different piece of equipment. Yes, it requires a trommel and a shaker and a glass breaker and it requires all the things that need to be done. But if you're in the business, it would be our opinion that if you're in the business of waste management and you want to be a MRF in a single stream system, you should be, sorting the things. Now, that said, there are economic realities that are putting pressure on waste management systems. I do not deny those at all. It's not about the glass. It's about the drop in commodity prices for mixed plastics, fiber, all these other things that have hit. National Sword is not about the glass. National Sword is about the depressed market for the other commodities that were lifting it up. Glass has been kind of the slow, steady turtle in the commodity market, if you will. It's been steady and lower. And so if you're running a business and you're pinched, and you have to make a decision about the next $500,000 investment that you're going to make, you may make it to service some other commodity that you feel is a greater return. The additional disincentive for glass recycling in a lot of places is low landfill costs, tipping fees that pay by weight, and the fact that glass isn't going to hurt anything in the landfill. It's inert. We fight this in Florida all the time. The folks in Florida are constantly saying, oh, we love to put glass in landfills because it doesn't harm the water table and, all of that sort of thing. It really is a combination of things, but it's definitely not demand on the side of the glass container manufacturers and I don't speak for the fiberglass guys, but I talk to them a lot, and it's not a lack of demand there. I know that the plants... You have 3 glass container plants in Oklahoma. You have more glass container plants in Oklahoma than every state except for California and Indiana. Even Pennsylvania, I guess maybe there is a small third one in Pennsylvania. There's plenty of, you got plenty of demand there. They're importing recycled glass because they can't get the glass from Oklahoma. It's very much like the situation we have in Virginia, where the plants in Virginia are importing recycled cullet from other states because they can't get it from Virginia because it's going straight to landfill.
Scott, I can comment a little bit on that. On behalf of OI and, our Muskogee operation, which is obviously located in Muskogee, Oklahoma. We're making a lot of food containers for the food market, jars, and some limited juice containers as well. We struggle to get clean glass into our plant. We are bringing glass in from California, as far away as from California, to sustain some of the levels that we're looking to maintain in that operation. So it is a challenge for us. We'd love to see some additional growth in collection and beneficiation in the state of Oklahoma. I'm sure our competitors would love it as well. There hasn't been, with the exception of a couple smaller operations and like Dulubec and Okmulgee, there's not a whole lot of processing capabilities today in the state. So I think one of the challenges would be is unlike in Pennsylvania, where we do have the ability to leverage cap glass and leverage the technologies they have there fairly locally. I feel like there would have to be some additional investment in the infrastructure and processing to make it successful in Oklahoma. Otherwise, you're going to be moving that glass far to be processed and moving it back. So the transportation would be a detriment. So I just wanted to give you a little insight from OI.
I'd like to chime in as well with the myth of no demand for glass. We, from our end users as well, have consistently asked for even more glass year over year. Actually, just recently, this January, again, we've been asked almost to double the amount of inputs of glass that they're wanting over at Owens Corning in Kansas City. But there's plenty of demand out there. And I think what Bob was touching on, Ashley and Scott, is the clean value of it. Is there is a lower demand for dirty glass, just like the rest of the commodities. But with the source separation that Ashley's been doing out in Pennsylvania and we're doing in Kansas City and this Midwest region, that's where the value comes in. And that's where people can find these outlets for glass. And there is value where you're not just going to take serious hits or have to pay landfill fees or even pay to just get rid of it. So that's the name of the game right there, is the value in the glass is in the cleanliness.
Well, thank you, everybody. Courtney or Terry or anybody from Fertile Ground want to chime in on that one as well?
Sure, yeah. So we have, sorry, I've got to. Sorry, I had two devices on. So yeah, we've been collecting glass. We have a municipal glass collection service in Nichols Hills and in Norman. Norman was one of those municipalities that stopped accepting glass. And we have also had very little contamination. We also have a single stream service, and glass has been one of those collection services that we don't have to worry about contamination. It seems like everyone is really good about emptying their jars out, even like rinsing them out. We also have a drop-off center for people who are outside of our service area. And lately, especially with COVID, we haven't really been manning the drop-off as much. And yeah, same, we haven't had much contamination, which is really, it was kind of surprising to me how little contamination there is. So I feel like, and yeah, the drop-off center has really grown. Like the demand is definitely there. Our drop-off center is growing all the time. We're getting a lot more people bringing their glass to us. So it's exciting to see that, people are willing to go out of their way to take their glass somewhere. And I think that there's definitely room to expand glass collection in the area. So I'm excited that you all are doing this and kind of raising awareness about that demand. And I hope that more people kind of start to see the demand and start meeting those needs.
Thanks everybody. Yeah, Okra focused on glass recycling as one of the hot topics at our conference this year, and we definitely have seen a lot of interest in glass. Some of the questions coming in have been how do we get involved? How do we start this in our community, whether it's a small community or I know Julie asked about Ardmore. So we really wanted to have this initial lunch and learn to see what the interest was. And I mean, there's 41 people on Zoom right now. I don't know how many are watching on Facebook Live. I mean, we had 60 register. So I definitely think that there is an interest here in Oklahoma. I know we've already talked to some of the folks on the call today about having a second lunch and learn to go into this even further and maybe talk more about how implementing this in our state might be possible. I know Bob mentioned processing is something we're going to need to consider if we're going to be dealing with large volumes of glass and making sure that we can process that and get it to the right place within our state. But we do have lots of opportunity. So we do have about 5 more minutes. I'll open it up to anybody that might have another question or
I've got a question on that. So yeah, we're currently using Dilubac, but I wasn't sure if anyone had any other places that they know of in the region that are taking glass on like a commercial scale.
I would say that it gets a little bit complicated for us in Kansas City, but we take it more on a regional scale instead of commercial scale. And Courtney, I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the commercial scale you're talking about smaller dumps and toters maybe for the commercial programs. And what we base it on is a lot like what Ashley presented on, which would be roll-off bins and drop-off sites, more of a regional structure. But we do work as well with the city of Norman and Stillwater, and we've been talking with a lot of communities in the northeast part of Oklahoma, looking for options for glass recycling as a whole in the municipality and the entire city itself.
Okay. Great, thank you.
They're the only processor I know of. I mean, beneficiator in Oklahoma that I know of, that we know of. I don't know why. I have not been able to talk to them, despite my efforts. I'm not sure how. I know that a lot of the Lubac sites specialize more in windshield or construction glass, maybe more than the container glass. But we'd like to talk to them. I would echo what Bob was saying and Josh. There's going to be a point where you can get that. I mean, the northeast part of the state is probably good for reach to Kansas City, right? So a little bit different than as you look closer you get to Texas. You know, the state is ripe for additional processing capacity. It would be an economic development opportunity.
There was a SMI facility that was located in Sapulpa at one point in time. That facility, as far as I'm aware of, is no longer operating. So I think Dilubac is pretty much the only site that is currently doing. And Scott, you're right. They do a lot of windshield. They've got various applications that they're recycling. The challenge that they have is, the last I'm aware, they don't have the same capabilities that a capped glass, for example, has, or they have the ability to do color sorting, where they've invested in optical sorting equipment that can color sort the glass once it's been commingled. And that really is, the key investment that you need, particularly for the fiberglass or for the container glass market. And, it's one of the things we'd want to think about, longer term, as if we're able to get and grow more of the collection and try to do more processing locally. That would be definitely something we'd be looking into.
If I could I know it's 1:59, but I wanted to address the fact that a couple of people asked about small communities just getting started. And, I wanted to focus on our program today, but there have been a lot of sort of lone actors. And, like I said, our mission is, that's great. Get it out of the landfill, get it into a recycling collection. And so there have been some small communities that have said, I don't know, do we need to work on your program? Is it the right fit? And what we advise them, I think there was one community we have a municipality that I think has like 300 people in it, that wanted to provide something, and they said, well, we have our own like a toter or some different type of bin, some different their own public works truck. And I said, well, what you could do is we could just connect you with the folks that to make sure that you're going to get that glass to the right place. And they set up their their bin, whatever equipment they had in their public works yard, and they did staff some of their own collections in that manner, because maybe it wasn't a roofed bin with really specific technical specifications. And we know folks who are getting it started that way, and I think it relies though on the infrastructure that makes the transportation just a local feasibility for those communities. But just wanted to address that it's not just us, and it's a community effort, and really it's kind of the momentum takes off much more quickly in our experience than you would imagine once you just test it.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Ashley. Because I know there were a lot of people thinking, okay, and Julie, you might be one of them. You mentioned your Earth Day event and maybe doing something similar at your Earth Day event. So again, we were just hoping this would be informational from Ashley, and we were interested in seeing about pooling resources and working together. We liked the idea of the traveling bin as a solution for communities that may not be able to do something permanent or do something all the time. So again, this was the hope of getting the conversation started today. And so Ashley, again, thank you so much for sharing what you're doing in Pennsylvania. And I also want to do a shout out to Robert Pickens, who most of you know, or many of you know. He's the one that brought the idea of this Lunch and Learn and told us about what Pennsylvania was doing. So thanks, Robert. So there's been lots of things in the chat. Josh has put his information, but we have contact information for all of these folks, and I can put that in a follow-up email to everyone that registered today. So thank you. So we'll make sure we get contact information for you. But also, if anyone is interested, we are talking about forming a glass working group to work on this issue, whether it's well, we don't know yet, but the working group will figure out where that's going to go. If you're interested in serving on the glass working group, you can email us at info@recycleok.org. And we're just excited about this opportunity. Glass, as Scott mentioned, it is inert in the landfill, but it still has value to us and to lots of folks like Owens, Illinois, and the other container companies that find that as a valuable resource. So we'd like to do the right thing with it here in Oklahoma. So again, thank you, DEQ, for making this and other OKRA programs possible. We hope that you got something out of this Lunch and Learn, and stay tuned because we plan to have another one very soon talking about more Oklahoma specific information and maybe figure out how we can get some more programs going here in our state. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. It was a great experience to join this great group.